it's time to do a little State of the Union for LoRaWAN. And for that, I have Wienke from the things industry, the right person to tell us where things are at, what are the trends, and what he's seeing in the industry in terms of adoption of LoRaWAN technologies. That's on the IoT Show. Hi everyone, this is the IoT Show. I'm Olivier, your host. Thanks for tuning in. And today we have Wienke to discuss LoRaWAN. Wienke, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for your time. So Wienke, where are you calling from?
So we're our headquarters is in Amsterdam. So we're based in the Netherlands, but we operate globally. So we have a global infrastructure, and the majority of our business is in the US and EU and Southeast Asia. Yeah.
Awesome. Good to know. And it's a good trip to go and visit you all the time. You had an event. We'll talk about that. You had an event recently, the Things, how's it called? The Things Conference, right? That's what it is.
The Things Conference,
But
yes.
before we get to the topics and the State of the Union for LoRaWAN and this low power network technologies, who's Wienke? What are you doing in life, man?
Yeah, what am I doing in life? I'm CEO, co-founder of the Things Industries. I have a wife and two lovely daughters, I'm in the IoT business together with my business partner and co-founder Johan Stocking already now since 2015. And we started a company called the Things Industries, 100% focused on LoRaWAN. And that's been a quite a journey of development and growth. So that's Wienke.
Yeah, and well, you say 2015, so it's like some years now, right? So at some point, I was like, well, 2015 is not long ago, but now we're getting older. It's already 2024 almost. So yeah, it's been some time. And the LoRaWAN industry or technology and ecosystem in particular have been growing a lot. And some people still don't really know about low power, long range network technologies that are necessary for IoT scenarios in many cases. But can you tell us a bit more about why should someone care about LoRaWAN? How important it is?
Yeah, so in the basics, LoRaWAN is a way to wirelessly transmit small pieces of data in a very low power way, and that's why we sometimes call it LPWAN, low power wide area networks. And it's these kind of battery operated devices that can send, for instance, this one can send a temperature measurement. This one can send a GPS location, and this one, for instance, can send CO2 and measurements and some air quality stuff. And these are battery operated, so they last on a battery. Typically, they're designed to last on a battery for 3 years. So in an enterprise context, that's changed the total cost of ownership calculation, because you don't have to maintain your sensor network so heavily by, for instance, by needing to change the batteries. The beauty of it is that it's operating in the open spectrum. So there's many kind of gateway vendors out there. So this is a famous one, is a multi-tech LoRaWAN gateway. You also have these very small, cheap ones. And they create the network. So they have concentrator radios in them, and they can collect a lot of messages from these devices. And then you have a central network management software. So you need that manages these devices, but also these gateways. And that's kind of the bread and butter of the Things Industries, where we offer that to more than 1,000 customers across the world that build their networks and their solutions using these technologies.
Yeah. One thing I really liked about the way you're approaching the business is that you created an ecosystem around the technology, right? Technology is one thing, but because of the nature of the technology, which is about connecting these little sensors through gateways, these gateways are a type of device, and you actually were able to, as a community, as an ecosystem, to extend the story to have the notion of private gateway or network and public ones, where one can decide that they want to share access to the internet for a set of LoRaWAN devices around their gateway, and that establishes a public network for LoRaWAN devices to be connected. So tell me a bit more about how the ecosystem was built, and where the growth of that ecosystem is at.
Yeah, so what you saw is it started in 2015, and we were one of the first to join the LoRa Alliance, which is the organization that governs the technical specifications of the LoRaWAN standard. Um, and what we did with our organization called the Things Network, and what we do with the Things Conference is we created a user ecosystem, because creating the standard is one, but also making sure that you have a platform, a sandbox, what we call it, a sandbox environment where you can develop easily and with short iterations and with a lot of debugging tools. That's what we offered, and then basically what we help is kind of getting people from 0 to 1, which is incredibly hard with IoT. Everybody in IoT knows how hard it is to build your own success. And then with our enterprise platform, we helped you grow from 1 to 1 million. And typically, when it started, there was a lot of need by developers to play around with the technology, to figure out how it works, to figure out if it works for you. So how we started was to build this developer sandbox around the globe, where everybody that had such a gateway or such a gateway was able to connect it to that developer platform, and they would share their connectivity with each other to play around. Once they grow, they go to what we call to other things industries enterprise platform, and then they have private networks, and you have all kinds of other kind of carrier grade and enterprise grade security measurements. But if you want to develop, you want to have a lot of access and have a lot of openness. So by offering both kind of needs, we created this really nice kind of developer focused IoT ecosystem surrounding LoRaWAN.
Got it. Yeah, and that's actually an ecosystem that comes with a community that is pretty active. We're seeing the events, the Things Conference that has an iteration in your hometown, but then also, worldwide. You can see the use of LoRaWAN extend there, but you can see it through that community, looking at ways to connect these sensors efficiently. You talked about the low power aspect of LoRa, but there's also the long range aspect of LoRa. So, like the competitors, and I say competitors with quotes, because LoRaWAN as is so particular that I don't really see exactly what it competes with, because Wi-Fi is not as long range and super high battery consumer. Bluetooth is super short range, and low energy Bluetooth even lower. Zigbee, Z-Wave, same thing, don't have the range. The range is important as well. I'm seeing a lot of scenarios that are around farming, or full infrastructures being covered with a single LoRa gateway. Can you tell us a little bit about this long range aspect that we didn't touch from the technology perspective?
Yeah. So if you look at like such a device, the beauty of it is there's low power, but it indeed is also long range. So if you would go for line of sight, we have users that have measured a distance of 831 kilometers in range, this is a massive outlier, right? This is literally the probability is very low. So, but it shows a bit of what it can do.
Yep.
When you look at the business viability of LoRaWAN, the longer range, maybe you can make it work. Also the lower the probability that a message will arrive. So
Okay.
what you've seen is that in the kind of in the adoption now by the enterprises and systems integrators, you've seen that it's been initially positioned as an LP WAN technology, but what we see, it's mostly used as an LP-LAN technology. So you kind of like, you see this press release, or you see this news about LoRaWAN can be super long range. On average on our platform, kind of the gateway, which can be this, but also kind of this can be on a cell tower, and kind of integrated with a nice big antenna. You see that typically the average distance between gateway and device is like 100 to 200 meters. So and typically that's space where Wi-Fi doesn't work, but LoRaWAN is great, and there's really it's really hard to find a good ecosystem that has a lot of these off-the-shelf devices in the ecosystem to service your specific problem. So what you see is that the technical capability is long range, but the business viability is mostly in the medium range, right? Like it's just a bit further than Wi-Fi, and that also means, and that if you look, that's more of a technical thing. In that range, also the low power configuration is very optimum. Is a very optimal. So and typically that's the business case driver, the long range of the devices and the low maintenance that brings in the total cost of ownership. So yes, kind of it can do a lot, but where it drives value is not in this very long range capability.
Interesting. So you mentioned a term LP LAN versus LP1. Can you tell me a bit more about that? So low power LAN versus low power WAN. LoRaWAN has one in there, right? But why did you mention LP LAN in that case?
Yeah, because I see that the way that that where we now see the growth. So we have our software supports almost 2.5 million devices across the world, and what we see is where our customers are successful is in this LP LAN setting. So they're, for instance, using it in a building, in a stadium, in a mall, or kind of smart city, which I also call a LAN, right? Like a smart city where you have specifically one use case around smart metering. Smart water metering, for instance, is a vertical which we're very successful in with customers in the UK, Mexico, in the European Nordics, and many places around the world. So you see this kind of LAN function, and that's where we see the growth now. And I wouldn't really call it a WAN because these are private, dedicated networks, and they're more designed as a LAN. And that's also where kind of if you build a LoRaWAN network like kind of similar like a Wi-Fi network, these things can be really, really low power. And it really kind of like touches on that really strong value proposition of low power if you make a LP LAN.
That makes sense. That makes sense. And so you kind of alluded to that, but but we wanted to talk about the technology and the trends and where things are going. And a good indicator of the trends is the things industry, which is your enterprise part, right? Your business part. How is TTI doing? What are the latest news? So you had the things industries event recently, or the things conference. What are the latest news about TTI and the stack that you guys are proposing? What do you want to share here?
Yeah, so I think that the main message there, what we saw is that LoRaWAN is growing. So we have now almost 2.5 million devices that are supported by our that LoRaWAN network core software that we help our customers with. But we also see that the adoption is growing with regards to message sent. So we now route around 2.5 billion LoRaWAN messages. And maybe if you're from the IP world, 2.5 billion LoRaWAN messages per month is not a lot. But these devices typically are very careful in sending messages because every message they send will deplete the battery. So 2.5 billion. The other one is what we saw. It's cracking a lot of different nuts. So we did an analysis on which kind of verticals our customers kind of focus on with some high-level analysis, and then we come up with a very unsatisfying answer. Is that like let's say it's very, very well distributed across kind of 25 major verticals, and that's very interesting. That means that it actually is penetrating the market across the board. And then we see also kind of the volumes coming. So and kind of that's one data point. The other data point is IoT remains hard. People say IoT made easy. That gives you a lot of false promises because it's still incredibly hard. But if it's successful, yeah, it's very successful. So that's what we also saw during the conference with all these different showcases. So we now have this kind of portfolio, or kind of like you have all these cases in the market, and many of them are, I can't share here. They're with Fortune 500 companies, or with kind of utility companies that are very protective of their infrastructure. But we see kind of these 100K amount device projects coming on our software. And what's really interesting is that there's kind of a level of repeatability in there. So for instance, if you look at cold chain monitoring, or you look at smart metering, these are very replicable. And what we did, without exposing customers, or kind of like sharing anything that we don't want to share, is that we created a business case repository, which is a high-level business case repository of a lot of different business cases and devices. You have the link here.
Yep.
And
Just brought it. I knew you were about to mention that, so I was like,
okay,
yeah, let me bring it.
yeah, you bring it up. That's right. So, and what we feel is that there's so much inspiration you can get from all these different LoRaWAN devices. So I'm holding up like here 3 all the time, but on our device repositories, or on our kind of like directory with all the devices that work on our platform, we already have more than 1,000 device profiles. So what I think is really fascinating is that it's not so much that IoT is consolidating or converging, but it's, what I see is more kind of diverging into all the niches. And I think that's really kind of a strong trend which the LoRaWAN ecosystem can adopt, because it can be so agile because of the low hardware development cost. It can kind of solve a lot of specific problems. So yeah, just to wrap up a long answer to a simple question, I think that was really what we celebrated at the Things conference. It's kind of like all these different solutions and all these successes, and just inspire each other. So like, yeah, you can be successful there in IoT. It's not only failure, but yeah. So that was great.
I appreciate that. I appreciate your community approach, your ecosystem plus community approach. I think from the get-go you were mentioning that it was about making the technology accessible to developers, so that they can evaluate it, they can try it, they can play with it, to then have a smoother transition into the business aspects. And you're saying that now, which is, we are 2024. You say 2015 is when the technology really was born. It's mature, and people recognize that and are adopting it in actual, as you were sharing numbers there, they're adopting it and using it in actual real life scenarios at scale. So which is really more than encouraging, which is great, actually.
Yeah. No, it is kind of the whole IoT stack is and it's a bit of a cliche, but you have to do it with an ecosystem, because these separate components is like being very knowledgeable in building such a device, or being very knowledgeable in building a gateway, and being very knowledgeable in building the cloud software to manage them, are all different puzzle pieces, and they work together through open standards. And we created our organization with the mantra, let's build this thing together. And we always kind of try to drive that through in everything we do. And if I look at how the business is going right now and how we're growing 60% year on year on revenue, we're growing 100% year on year on adoption. It just really feels like that's really the winning formula. And that you really have to build long-term partnerships. Although it's so incredibly cliche, it is very true.
Yeah, I like cliches. It's fine.
They're cliches for a reason.
They're cliche for a reason. Wienke, thanks a lot. We will talk more about LoRaWAN, I'm sure, in the future. Maybe Johan can come in and excite our developers about the latest and greatest. And while it was really great to have you, I wish you a good night, because it's evening for you soon. Thanks for your time, and see you soon. Thanks, Wienke.
Thanks for having me.
Bye.